You know, after 57 years in this job, people ask me, what was the best time you ever had? The most fun you ever had while wearing a badge? And I always give them the same answer. Miami. 1985. The coke was so big, so absurd, so completely off the scale of anything a London copper was supposed to be doing, that I still can't quite believe that it happened. I was 43 years old. I've been in the Met since I was 18. I walked a beat in Oxton, worked my way up through CID, done undercover jobs. Most nearly got me killed. I'd seen the Krays inside, watched the Richardsons fall, spent years chasing the ghost of the Great Train Robbery. I was not burned out, but close. The kind of tide that gets into your bones, that makes you wonder if you've got anything left to give. And then, the phone rang. It was my governor, a man called Frank Parry. The same Frank Parry who'd sent me undercover with the Patterson brothers in the 70s. He was older now, closer to retirement. But his voice was the same. Gravelly, direct. No time for nonsense. Get in my office, he said. Now. I walked down the corridor, past desks where coppers were doing what coppers do. Paperwork, phone calls, the endless grind of the job. I knocked on Frank's door. He waved me in. There's a thing, he said. A thing in America. They've asked for someone from the Met. Someone who knows organised crime. Someone who can liaise. I blinked. Liaise? With who? The FBI and the DEA. There's a task force. President Reagan's Organised Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force program. They're going after the big boys. The Colombians. The Miami crews. And apparently, some of the money's ending up here. In London. He slid a file across the desk. I opened it. Photographs. Men in suits. Yachts. Cocaine bricks. Names I didn't recognise then, but would come to know intimately. And there, at the bottom of the pile, a photograph of Miami. Sunshine. Palm trees. A world away from the grey of London. You're sending me to Miami, I said. Frank nodded, still looking pained. For 6 months, maybe longer. You'll be attached to the FBI field. There'll be some office down there. You'll share intelligence, follow the money, and try your best to not get shot. I tried to look professional. Tried to look like I was weighing the responsibility, considering the risks, thinking about the job. But inside I was doing cartwheels. Miami, sunshine, the FBI, fit birds fucking everywhere. This wasn't a job. This was an holiday with a badge. When do I leave? I asked. Tomorrow. And? I almost said my name then. Sir? Try not to embarrass us. I didn't embarrass him. Much. But I sure as hell had a good time trying. I stepped off that plane into another world. I remember it like it was yesterday. The heat, the light, the noise. I've been in London my whole life. London is a grey city. Grey skies, grey building, grey people. Even in summer, there's a dampness that gets into your bones. A weight that never quite lifts. Miami in July is something else. The heat hits you like a wall. Thick, wet, tropical. It's the kind of heat that wraps around you, that makes you feel like you're breathing water. I was wearing a wool suit, a London suit, grey wool, double-breasted, the kind of thing you'd wear to court or a funeral. I looked like a mortician who'd wandered into a disco. Waiting for me was Special Agent Mike Torres of the FBI. 6'2", tan, sunglasses, lining suit, loafers with no socks. He looked like he'd stepped out of an episode of Miami Vice. I looked like I'd stepped out of a black and white photograph from 1952. He looked at me, looked at my suit, burst out laughing. "Jesus Christ," he said. "You're going to die in that." I stuck out my hand. "Pleasure to meet you too." Mike threw my bags in the back of his convertible, the white one. Obviously he'd been watching the show. And we hit the road. The top was down, sun was blazing, and I was sitting in a wool suit in a convertible, sweating through every pore in my body. I must have looked ridiculous, but I didn't care, because for the first time in years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Hope. That's what it was. Hope. The world felt bigger than it had in a long time. The case files, the paperwork, the endless grind of the Met. It all felt very, very, very far away. And for a moment, just for a little moment, I let myself believe that. Maybe I could be someone else. Someone who wasn't carrying the weight of everything I'd seen. Mike drives like a maniac. Lane changes without signalling. Speed limits as suggestions. The radio blasting out something with a beat I didn't recognise. He was talking, but I couldn't hear him over the wind and the music. I didn't care. I just sat there, letting the sun hit my face, feeling the heat, feeling alive. "First thing," Mike said, pulling into a parking lot, "we're getting you some clothes. You can't work undercover looking like a bank manager from Croydon now, can ya?" I opened my mouth to protest. Something about professionalism, about standards, about the dignity of the Metropolitan Police. But he was right. I looked absolutely ridiculous. An hour later, I was the proud owner of 3 linen suits, pale blue, cream, and a terrifying shade of pink, and more pastel t-shirts than any grown man should own. I looked like an ice cream salesman. I looked like I'd been airlifted from an episode of Miami Vice. But guess what? I looked like I belonged. I also bought a pair of sunglasses, Ray-Bans, the kind with the mirrored lenses. I put them on, looked at myself in the mirror, and for a second, I didn't recognise the man looking back. He was younger, lighter, freer. He was someone who hadn't spent 20 years chasing the darkness. I liked him. I liked him a lot. The FBI office in Miami was nothing like Scotland Yard. Scotland Yard is old stone, high ceilings, the weight of history pressing down on you. This was different. The task force was something else. President Reagan's program. He brought together the FBI, the DA, the VA, the IRS, Customs, everyone who had a stake taking down drug trade. And Miami was ground zero. The coke pipeline from Colombia ran straight through here, and the money flowed out like water. My new colleagues were colourful. There was Mike, my chaperone, who'd grown up in Havana and spoke Spanish like a native. He was the one who knew the streets, the people, the unspoken rules of Miami. He was also the one who made sure I didn't get myself killed. There was Dave from the DEA. He'd spent 3 years undercover with the cartels and had the 1,000-yard stare to prove it. He was quiet, watchful, the kind of man who noticed everything and said almost nothing. But when he did speak, you listened. There was Carla from the IRS. She was small, sharp, with glasses. that made her look like a librarian. But she could follow money through more shell companies than anyone thought possible. She was the one who found the patterns, who connected the dots, who made the cases stick. And there was Tony, an ex-cop from New York who'd been transferred to Miami after a case went sideways. He told jokes so offensive that even I blushed. He also had an heart the size of the Everglades, and he walked through fire for any of us. They took to me straight away. The Limey, that's what they called me. Or Scotland. Or when they were feeling fancy, Inspector Gadget. I didn't mind. They were good people, sharp, funny, and utterly dedicated to the job. My role was simple. Follow the money back to London. The Colombians were laundering millions through banks all over the world, and some of it was ending up in the UK. Property mostly. Fancy flats in Knightsbridge, country estates. Legitimate businesses bought with dirty cash. My job was to spot those connections, to share intelligence, and when the time came, to help put together cases that would stick on both sides of the Atlantic. It was the kind of work I was good at. Patient, methodical, the long game. But first, I had to learn to blend in. Blending in wasn't easy. I was 43-year-old, London copper in a city that moved at the speed I couldn't match. The language, the culture, the way people talked to each other. It was just different. Mike took me under his wing. He taught me how to order coffee. Cafecito, not espresso. And for God's sake, don't ask for milk afternoon. He taught me how to drive, aggressively, with one hand on the wheel and the other gesturing. He taught me how to talk to people, how to read them, how to know who was real and who was playing a game. Down here, he said, everyone's playing a game. The question is, what are they playing for? I learned the rhythms of the city, the way it woke up late, came alive in the afternoon, pulsed through every evening, and didn't sleep until the early hours. I learned the neighbourhoods, Coconut Grove, Coral Gables, Little Havana, South Beach. Each one had its own feel, its own rules, its own secrets. And I learned about the money. God, the money. It was everywhere, in the cars, the clothes, the buildings. The way people talked about deals that would change their lives. There was a fever in Miami in the 80s. A sense that anything was possible. That fortunes could be made overnight. That the rules didn't apply. I understood that fever. I'd seen it in London, in the 60s, when the Krays were building their empire. The same hunger, the same recklessness, the same belief that you could take what you wanted if you were willing to pay the price. But in Miami, the stakes were higher, the money was bigger, and the price was paid in blood. The first time they sent me into the field, I nearly blew in the first 5 minutes. We were at a club in South Beach, one of those places where the music was so loud, you could feel it in your teeth. Our target was a mid-level dealer, who liked to hold court there, buying drinks for everyone, and flashing the cash like it was going out of style. Mike and I were posing as investors, legitimate businessmen, looking for opportunities. I was wearing my new pale blue suit, trying to look casual, trying not to stare at everything like a tourist. Carlos came over, all smiles and gold chains. He bought us drinks, talked about his import-export business, dropped hints about special products he could source. I was nodding along, doing my best impression of a shady businessman. When he leaned in close, "You ever tried a product?" he asked. "Best in Miami, straight from Colombia, and I can get you a sample." I froze. This was it. The moment. Do I say yes? Do I say no? What would a real investor do? I thought about everything Mike had taught me. The rules, the rhythms, the way you never show weakness, never show uncertainty, Never let them see you hesitate. And I couldn't remember any of it. My mind was blank. I was a copper from Oxton, standing in a Miami nightclub, being offered cocaine by a man who looked like he stepped out of a music video. Mike saved me. He laughed, clapped Carlos on the shoulder and said, "My friend is more of a whiskey man, but I might make you up on that." Carlos laughed too, clapped me on the shoulder and moved on. Crisis averted. Later in the car, Mike couldn't stop laughing. You look like a deer in the headlights, man. Best in Miami. And you just sat there with your mouth wide open. "I'm a London copper," I said. "We don't get offered cocaine at networking events." Mike shook his head, still laughing. "Welcome to Miami, Scotland. You're going to love it here." He was right. I did love it, but it took me a while to stop being scared. Not every moment was glamorous. Some of it was just waiting. Hours and hours of waiting. In a van with no air conditioning. Watching a warehouse that never seemed to do anything. Dave from the DEA was my partner. All the time on these shifts. He'd been undercover for years. Deep undercover. The kind that messes with your head. He spent 18 months inside a cartel operation, pretending to be someone he wasn't. Building relationships with people who would have killed him if they'd known the truth. Hell, they could have killed him on any day for anything. He came out of the operation with a wife he'd met undercover, a son he was still getting to know, and a 1,000-yard stare that never quite went away. He was the quietest person I'd ever met, but on stakeouts, he was the best company you could ask for. He told me stories about his time with the cartels, about the nights he spent in the jungle compounds, listening to men plan murders, while he just smiled along and nodded. About the day a man put a gun to his head and asked if he was police, and he looked that man in the eye and said no, and the man believed him. About the way you learn to live with the lies, to make them part of you, to forget that there was ever anything else. "I lost myself in there," he said once. "I don't know if I ever found myself back, and I don't know if I ever will." I understood. I'd felt the same way years before, when I was Johnny Cole. The way the lie becomes the truth. The way you start to forget who you really are. The way the mask becomes the face. We sat in the van for hours, sometimes days, watching nothing happen. We talked about everything and nothing. Our lives, our regrets, the things we'd seen that we couldn't unsee. And somewhere in the middle of all that waiting, we became something like friends. And then one day, something happened. 3 weeks into the stakeout, a truck pulled up, refrigerated, the kind that carries produce. Men in overalls started unloading crates, but something was off. They were too careful, too watchful. The way they moved, the way they looked around before opening each door. It wasn't the rhythm of honest work. Dave grabbed the binoculars. "That's them," he said. "That's the load." I looked closer. The crates were labelled as fruit, bananas, pineapples, mangoes. But the men, they handled them in such a way, like they were full of gold. It told such a different story. "We need to follow that truck," Dave said. "Call it in." I grabbed the radio, and just like that, the stakeout became a chase. What happened next was something like from a film. The truck took off, and suddenly every police car in Miami was after it. We were in the van, not exactly built for high-speed chases, but Dave drove like a man possessed. We bounced over curbs, through back streets, somehow keeping up. The truck finally got boxed in near the port. Agents swarmed from everywhere. The doors were forced open, and inside were crates. Hundreds of them, labelled as bananas, pineapples and mangoes. But when they were opened, there wasn't fruit inside. I'll give you one guess what it was. Cocaine. bricks and bricks of it, pure like the driven snow. White, worth millions. The biggest seizure the task force had made in all year. I stood there, in the Miami heat, watching agents dance around like they'd won the World Cup, and I couldn't help it. I started laughing. Proper, helpless laughter. Because here I was, a beat copper from Oxton, standing in the middle of a multi-million-dollar drug bust in Florida, covered in sweat and grinning like an idiot. Mike came over, slapped me on the back. Not bad for a limey, eh? First month on the job, and you're already in on the big one. I shook my head. I'm just a liaison, Mike. I didn't do anything. He laughed. You showed up, son. That's enough. Now come on, we're celebrating. That night, we hit a bar in Coconut Grove. The whole task force, FBI, DEA, IRS, Customs, and one very confused London copper. We drank, we laughed, we told stories that got taller with every round. I remember trying to explain cricket to a room full of Americans. It didn't go down well. They kept asking why the game lasted 5 days, and I kept trying to explain that it just did, and they just kept laughing. And eventually, I gave up and bought another round. I remember Mike teaching me to salsa. I have no rhythm, never have. But Mike had patience, and he kept trying. And by the end of the night, I could at least move in time with the music. Not very well, but in time. I remember Carla from the IRS doing an impression of our boss. It was so accurate, so devastating, that half of us nearly choked on our drinks. The boss man was called Henderson, a good man, but a serious one. And Carla had him down perfectly, the way he'd clear his throat before delivering bad news, the way he'd say gentlemen, like it was a warning, the way he'd rub his forehead when the reports came in that they weren't what they wanted to hear. Somewhere around midnight, I found myself on the balcony, looking out at a Miami skyline, the lights, the ocean, the city humming beneath us. Mike joined me, 2 beers in hand. Not bad for a work trip, eh? I took the beer. No, not bad at all. Seriously though, he said, you did good today. The intel you gave us the London end. That's what helped us connect the dots. You're not just a tourist here. You're part of the team. I didn't know what to say. I'd spent so long being the outsider, the one who just didn't quite fit, the copper from London in a world that didn't understand him. And here, in this city of heat and neon and chaos, I'd found something. Something I hadn't even known I was looking for. Thanks, Mike, I said. That really means something. He nodded, clinked his bottle against mine. We just stood there watching the city, not saying anything, and it was enough. That bus was just the beginning. Over the next few months, I got drawn deeper and deeper into the task force work, and what I learned, well, it was mind-blowing. The FBI had an operation running called Cash Web. They'd set up undercover companies, real storefronts, real businesses that offered money laundering services to the cartels. The Colombians would bring in suitcases full of cash, small bills mostly, from street sales, and the other undercover agents would launder it for them, clean it, move it, track it. Over 3 years they'd launched an estimated 200 million for the Medellin cartel, for Pablo Escobar's people, for the biggest traffickers in the world. And they did it from a storefront in Dadeland, Miami, right under their noses. I got to see some of it, the money rooms, the counting machines, the sheer volume of cash. It was staggering. Piles of it, bricks of it, stacked floor to ceiling, and all destined for Colombia, for Panama, for banks around the world. I'd never seen so much money in my life. Not in the bank jumps I'd investigated, not in the drug bust I'd worked, not anywhere. It was absolutely obscene. The kind of wealth that makes you question everything you thought you knew about the world. My job was to trade the bits that came to London, and there was plenty. Property deals mostly. Shell companies buying up prime real estate. Legitimate businesses fronting for dirty money. The cartels were laundering millions through London, and no one was stopping them. We built cases, lots of them, and eventually, when the operation wrapped up, dozens of people went to prison. Not the kingpins. They were too high, too protected. But the people who made their money work. The bankers, the lawyers, the property developers who thought they were untouchable. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. But it was something. But what I remember most, what I'll always remember, are the people, the characters. Dave, the DEA agent who spent so long undercover, he forgot his real name. He'd just slip into character without meaning to. Accents, mannerisms, the whole thing. We'd be getting coffee, and suddenly he'd be a Colombian drug lord ordering a latte. Terrifying, but hilarious at the same time. I asked him once how he kept it straight, how he knew which person was real. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he said, I don't. I just try to be the one that does the least harm. I've thought about that over the years. The least harm. Maybe that's all any of us can do. There was Carla from the IRS. She was the quiet one. The one who didn't say much at the bars, who didn't join in on the jokes. But at her desk, with the numbers in front of her, she was a different person. She could see the patterns no one else could see. She could follow money through 20 shell companies and come out the other end with a name and an account number. She was the one who made the cases stick. I learned more about money laundering from Carla than I ever learned from any textbook on a training course. She had a gift. She also had a sadness. Something in her eyes that she never talked about, that no one asked about. I hope she found whatever she was looking for. And there was Tony, the ex-New York cop. He was the loudest person I've ever met. He told jokes that would make a sailor blush. He drank like a fish, smoked like a chimney. And he had the art the size of Texas. He'd been transferred to Miami after a case went wrong. He never said what case, and no one asked. And he made it his mission to enjoy every minute of his life and his exile. He took me to a baseball game once. I didn't understand a word of what was happening, but the hot dogs were excellent, and Tony's commentary was worth the price of admission alone. See that guy, he'd say, pointing at a player. He makes more in a year than I'll make in my lifetime. And he can hit a curveball. Oh, the fuck's a curveball? I don't know. I don't care. It was just good to be with Tony. He taught me that you don't have to take everything seriously. That sometimes the best thing you can do is laugh. But the job will still be there tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. And if you don't find moments of joy, you'll burn out and become useless to everyone. I think about Tony a lot. I think about what he said about joy, and I try to remember it, even now. As the months passed, my role in the task force deepened. I wasn't just a liaison anymore. I was part of the team. And that meant going out into the field, doing the work, being someone I wasn't. The second big operation was different from the first. This time I wasn't just watching. I was playing a part. My cover was a British businessman looking to expand his interests into South America. And I had a backstory, a cover identity, a reason to be talking to the people we were targeting. The target was a man called Esteban. He was a money launderer, one of the best in Miami. He'd worked for the Cali cartel before moving to the Medellin operation. He'd laundered millions, maybe billions, and he was looking for new partners. I met him at a restaurant in Coral Gables. Nice place, white tablecloths, waiters who spoke in whispers. Esteban was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table in the corner, watching the door. He was a small man, neat, precise. His suit was dark, his hair was grey, and his hands were still. He looked like a professor, or a banker, or something else entirely, but respectable. But his eyes were something else. They missed nothing. "Mr. Harrington," he said, standing, offering his hand. "I've heard good things about you." "All lies, I hope," I said. "Lies are more interesting than the truth." He smiled, just a little. "I like you already. Sit, eat, or talk." We talked for 3 hours about business, about politics, about the state of the world. He asked about London, about my background, about the clients I'd worked with in Geneva. I told him stories that were true enough to be believed, false enough to be safe. And all the while, I was watching, noticing, learning. The way he held his fork, the way he looked at the door every time it opened, the way he never quite finished a sentence. He was a man who'd spent his life hiding things, and I was there to find them. That was the beginning of a strange relationship. Esteban trusted me, or at least, he trusted the man I was pretending to be. He introduced me to his partners, his associates, the people who moved his money and kept his secrets. He showed me things he shouldn't have shown anyone. And I betrayed him. I betrayed all of them. That was the job. That was always the job. But it wasn't all work. There were moments, so many moments, where I felt like I was living in a dream. A dream of sunshine and colour, and a life I'd never imagined. Mike taught me to drive a boat. We took his speedboat out into the bay, the wind in our faces, the water spraying up. I was terrible at it, of course. I nearly ran us into a channel marker, but Mike just laughed, took the wheel and showed me how it was done. "You're a London copper," he said. "You got the Thames. How do you not know how to drive a boat?" "On the Thames," I said. "We let someone else do the driving." He shook his head, grinning. "You English, always letting someone else do the work." Tony introduced me to Cuban food. I'd never had anything like it. The plantains, the black beans, the rice, the pork. It was a revelation. And the coffee. God, the coffee. In London we drink tea. In Miami they drink cafecito, sweet and strong, in tiny cups that leaves you vibrating. I drank so much cafecito that first month that I didn't sleep for 3 days. Mike laughed at me. "Your first lesson," he said. "Cuban coffee's not tea. 1 cup, maybe 2. After that, you're asking for trouble." I went to the beach, South Beach, where the beautiful people gathered, where the water was impossibly blue, and the sand was impossibly white. I sat on the sand, in my borrowed swimsuit, and watched the world go by. And I thought about London, about the grey streets, the heavy sky, the weight I'd been carrying for so long. I didn't miss it. Not then. Not there. There was a moment, I remember it clearly, when I was lying on the beach, the sun on my face, the sound of the waves in my ears, and I thought, I could stay here. I could just disappear, become someone else, leave the badge, the job, the way behind. I didn't, of course. I didn't. But for a moment, I let myself imagine it. A different life, a different me. One who hadn't seen the things I'd seen, or done the things I'd done. That's the thing about undercover work. It shows you who you really could have been, if things had been a little bit different. And sometimes, that's the hardest part coming back. The deeper I get, the deeper I got into task force work, the more I learned about the scale of what we were doing. Operation Cash Web wasn't just a sting. It was a whole new way of fighting the drug trade. The FBI had set up a real business. A storefront in Dadeland with a receptionist, a bank account, a legitimate front. It offered money laundering services to the cartels, and the cartels came. They brought suitcases full of cash, millions of dollars at a time, and the other undercover agents took it, cleaned it, and tracked it. Over 3 years, they laundered an estimated $200 million for the Medellin cartel, for Pablo Escobar's people, for the biggest traffickers in the world. And they did it from a storefront in Miami, right under their noses. I got to see some of the evidence, the photographs, the recordings, the transcripts, conversations, and I saw the names, the bankers, the lawyers, the businessmen who made it all possible. Some of them were in London. Some of them were people I'd known, people I'd worked with, people I trusted. There was the part of it close to home, the London end, the money that was flowing in the UK, buying property, buying influence, buying silence. I spent my career chasing criminals, putting them away, and here were the people who made it possible for them to get away with it. We built cases, dozens of them, and when the operation finally closed, dozens of people went to prison. Not the kingpins, they were too high, protected, but the people who moved their money, who made their wealth respectable. The bankers, the lawyers, the property developers who thought they were untouchable. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. And for a while, it felt like we were making a difference. The thing about undercover work, the thing they don't tell you, is that it's lonely. You're pretending to be someone you're not, surrounded by people who kill you if they know the truth. You can't trust anyone. You can't be yourself. You can't let your guard down. Not for a second. But in Miami, it was different. In Miami, I had people I could trust. People who knew who I really was. Who had my back. Who would walk through fire for me, and I for them. Mike with his laugh and wisdom, who taught me how to be someone else without losing myself. Dave with his quiet strength, who showed me that it was possible to survive the darkness and still be human. Carter with a sharp mind and a hidden sadness, who reminded me that work mattered, that cases we built made a difference. And Tony, with his jokes and his art, who taught me to laugh, to let go, to find moments of joy between the work. We became something more than colleagues. We became a family. The kind of family you choose. The kind that understands what you're going through, because they're going through it too. I'd never had that before. In the Met, you're on your own. You do the job. You go home. You don't talk about what you've seen. There's a culture of silence. The belief that talking about it is weakness. But in Miami, it was different. We talked. We shared. We carried each other. That's what I miss most. Not the sunshine. Not the money. Not the excitement. But the people. The feeling of being part of something bigger than myself. Of belonging to a tribe that understood. All good things come to an end. 6 months turned into 8, then into 9, then into 10. But eventually, they called me back. New cases, new jobs, new lives. I flew out of Miami on a grey morning. The sun was struggling to break through the clouds. The first clouds I'd seen in months. Mike and the team came to see me off. There were hugs, proper ones, and promises to visit, to write, to stay in touch. Some of us did, most of us didn't. That's the way with this job. You meet people, you become close. You promise to stay connected, and then life happens, and you drift apart. And before we know it, years have passed, and you're not sure you'd even recognise them if you saw them on the street. I sat on the plane watching Miami shrink below. The sun, the ocean, the city that had become home for 10 months. And I felt something I hadn't expected. Grief. Not for the work, not for the job, but for the life I was leaving behind. The life I could have had if things had been a little bit different. Stepping off that plane at Heathrow was like stepping into another world. Grey skies, cold rain, people in sensible clothes, not looking at each other, just getting on with it. I stood there in my Miami suit, faded now, a bit worn, and I felt like an alien. But it was home, and home, for all its greyness, was where I belonged. I went back to the Met, to the cases, the paperwork, the endless grind, and for a while, I was different, lighter, freer. The Miami sun had gotten into my bones, and I carried it with me. I told stories about Mike, about Dave, about the nightclub, about the bus that made us heroes for a day. My colleagues listened, laughed, shook their heads. They didn't understand. They couldn't. Miami was a world away, a dream they'd never share. But I kept the stories alive, because they were proof that something else existed, that the world was bigger than the grey streets of London, that there was colour and heat and life beyond the cases and paperwork. Mike and I stayed in touch for a while. Letters, then emails, then phone calls. He retired eventually, moved to the Keys, opened a little bar. I visited once years later. We sat on his porch, drank beer, watched the sunset, and talked about the old days. He was different, softer. The edge that made him such a good agent was gone, replaced by something else. Peace, maybe, or just acceptance. You ever think about staying, he asked me. Back then, you ever think about not going back? I thought about that moment on the beach, the sun on my face, the feeling that I could become someone else, someone who wasn't carrying the weight. Every day, I said, every single day. He nodded, and we sat there watching the sun sink into the ocean, and we didn't say anything, just like on that balcony. We didn't need to. Dave from the DEA, the one who forgot his own name, he's still alive. Well, last I heard. Living quietly somewhere in the Midwest. I hope he's happy. God, goodness knows he earned it. Carla from the IRS, I lost touch with her. She moved to Washington, I think, or maybe Boston. Somewhere cold. Somewhere that matched her eyes. I hope she found whatever she was looking for. Tony from New York, he died in 2008. Heart attack in his sleep. The way he'd have wanted it. I went to the funeral. It was in Brooklyn. On a grey day. The kind of grey day that reminded me of London. I stood at the back, watched the family grieve, and thought about the man who taught me to laugh. To Tony. To all of them. The best team I ever had. I've thought about Miami a lot over the years. About the heat, the noise, the colours. About the people I met, the cases we cracked, the laughs we shared. It was the adventure of a lifetime, and I was lucky enough to have it in the middle of my career. Some of those cases, the big ones, the ones we built together, they made a difference. Operation Cash Web alone took down dozens of money launderers and sent a big message to the cartels. We're watching, we're following the money, and we'll find you. But that's not what I remember. What I remember is the feeling of being part of something, belonging, being understood, the feeling of sunshine on my face, water under my feet, the feeling that for a little while I was someone else, lighter, someone who hadn't seen the things I'd seen. I spent my whole life chasing the darkness, looking at the worst humanity has to offer, trying to make sense of it, trying to stop it. And Miami, for all its faults, it was the light, the break, the moment when I let myself believe that there was something else. I'm retired now. 57 years I carried the badge. And when people ask me about the best time I ever had, I'll tell them about Miami. about the heat, the laughter, the chaos. About the night I nearly accepted cocaine from a drug lord in a nightclub. About the day we seized millions in a truck full of fake bananas. And then I show him the photograph. Me, Mike, Dave, Carla and Tony. All of us outside the FBI office, squinting into the sun. Pastel suits everywhere, big hair, and even bigger smiles. Best time I ever had, and I'd do it all again tomorrow. 57 years at the badge. And sometimes late at night, when the memories are too heavy to carry alone, I close my eyes and I'm back there, in that convertible, top down, wind in my face, sun setting over the ocean, Mike beside me, laughing at something I said, the city humming, alive, waiting for us to find it. I don't know if I was a different person in Miami. I don't know if that was the real me, or someone I was pretending to be, or someone I could have become if things had been different. But I know that for a little while I was happy, truly, completely, and utterly happy. And I know that I carried that happiness back with me, that it stayed with me through the years, through the cases, through the darkness. It became part of me, something I could reach for when the weight got too heavy. So, let's raise a glass to Miami, to the 80s, to the craziest, most wonderful assignment of my entire career, to Mike, Dave, Carla, Tony, the best team I ever had, and to the man I was for a little while, the one in the pastel suit, the one with a big smile before he could be anyone. Thanks for listening as always. If you like this kind of content, be sure to like and subscribe. And I'll always be here when the next memory comes a knocking. But until that time, remember that the law is always watching you.